I was really happy to see this news from GM this morning, which is weird because I'm not like a massive, huge fan of General Motors. In fact, a lot of the things they do perplex me, but at first, Ford and Rivian got access to the full Supercharger network with now over 17,000 stalls across North America to access, but then there's a little bit of new management under the Tesla charging team. You guys remember that little news story way back? Tesla needed to cut cost in order to afford all of those NPUs at Giga Texas, so they decided to fire everybody on the charging team, which was, of course, the most reasonable, logical thing to do, and then hire back just the people as needed. And I think that put a real dent and delay into the rollout of giving more supercharger access to third parties, which, you know, helps with the whole electrification process for everybody. Not important, obviously. That shouldn't be prioritized against making sure that they have enough AI training data for their humanoid robots. But now it seems like the charging team, at least, is finally back on course and is willing to now let another major automaker access the supercharger network, and I'm very grateful for this because this is actually a pretty big one, okay? I'm not going to make a video every single time another automaker gets supercharger access. I know Volvo is probably next and Polestar will probably follow, but the reason I would say GM is the big one is because they probably have more EVs, at least right now, on the road than anybody that isn't Tesla. And unlike Ford and Rivian, which pretty much only had two models gaining access to the supercharger network, it was the Lightning and the Mach-E, and then it was the R1T and the R1S. But now with GM, you're not just adding capability to the Hummer EV, you're also adding the Blazer, you're also adding the Silverado EV, the Equinox, and still technically the Chevy Bolt, which is of course the big one. There are tens of thousands of those things on the road, so they're adding a lot to the network with this update. And some of you might be concerned from the very beginning, hold on a second, that sounds like a lot of EVs that are going to be clogging up the charging network. Oh yeah, the Cadillac Lyriq as well. There was even more than I could remember. So with all of these new EVs that can now access superchargers, isn't that going to slow down the availability of this network? Is the lines going to grow now? Well, the good news is GM has thought of a way to slow it down, and that's primarily because they are not giving out CCS to NACS adapters. Of course, all of GM's vehicles so far still have a CCS connector, and to access all of these supercharging locations, you're going to need an adapter, which GM is charging $225 for a GM certified, like, official adapter. And surprisingly, they are very much against you using third-party adapters. Even though they've proven to work for other brands, GM is saying that if you charge your vehicle with a non-approved adapter, that it voids the warranty, which is kind of surprising. A little drastic in my opinion, but it just kind of sounds like they're covering their butts in case of some kind of overheating issue. But most GM EVs don't even charge all that fast in the first place, with the exception of the Hummer and the EV, which is not most of GM's EVs on the road. The vast majority of their electric vehicles peak at around 150 kilowatts, which I don't think you're going to have really any overheating issues with that. And then once you get into the Chevy Bolt, there's actually two barriers to entry. So not only do you have to spend the $225 on the certified adapter, but you also have to take it to a dealership to receive a software update. This one is kind of confusing to me. I'm not exactly sure why, because if you watch Tom Malogny's video explaining how it works, he somehow partnered with GM and got exclusive access to show how it works. But I think they're kind of turning on supercharger access in a bit more of a sloppy way, because, you know, Ford and Rivian, there's a little bit of a setup process to make sure it works at the beginning, but then after that, it's just plug and charge. You literally just take the cable, put on the adapter, plug it in, and it starts charging, whereas Chevy makes it feel a little bit more complex from what I could see. But maybe down the road, they want to have plug and charge functionality for all of their EVs, and the Chevy Bolt simply just does not have the firmware in their vehicles to have that plug and charge functionality. Probably because it's the only EV that GM has on the road that technically wasn't really made on like the Ultium platform. So it should be a free software update, which is good, but still kind of weird that if you have a Chevy Bolt, you got to take it to a dealership, and apparently they're instructed to know what to do, how to install the software update. It can't be done over the air. I guess the Chevy Bolts have been around for a while, so maybe that's part of the reason, but still feels a little clunky to have to go get the software update from a dealership, then buy the over $200 adapter, and now you can access superchargers, but again, it's a Chevy Bolt, which means the peak speed is not going to be much more than 50 kilowatts, as we've already seen at the few locations with Magic Docks plug in for Chevy Bolts. And even when that event takes place, the Chevy Bolt has the charge port on the driver's side front, meaning that you're going to occupy two stalls. So it may sound a little backwards and hypocritical, but yeah, the Hummer Hummer EV actually takes up less space at a supercharger than a Chevy Bolt because we didn't have a standardized charge port location. But thank God the Hummer EV and the Silverado EV actually as well, both of those have the charge port in the same location as Tesla's with the driver's side rear. I don't know why they changed it on just those vehicles. The Chevy Blazer and the Cadillac Lyriq, both of those still have charge ports on the driver's side front, so it's definitely not like a Ultium platform thing, like only Ultium vehicles have the port in the rear. So I don't know why they did it that way, but yeah, it's probably a good move because the Silverado and Hummer have ginormous battery packs, and most of the V3 superchargers aren't going to get much more than 200 kilowatts anyway. So those EVs have big battery packs, and they'll probably be stopped at the superchargers for longer. So I suppose it's a good thing that they're only occupying one space. Yes, it's going to be a bit annoying if there's a lot of Chevy Bolt owners that catch on to this and start occupying multiple stalls at superchargers, and once again can only charge at 50 kilowatts. But again, the good news is Chevy Bolts, most of them don't have very large battery packs. So even though they're charging slowly, they shouldn't have to be there terribly long. Honestly, because of the difference in peak charging speed, it might actually be somewhat comparable to the Hummer EV charge time. But Electrify America is a giant joke, and it's far more expensive even than Tesla, who charges more for non-Teslas. But they're unreliable, there's long waits, and Teslas tend to have more than enough charging stalls at their locations, and it appears every day now they're building out more and more V3.5 charging locations, which have longer cables, which means that you don't have to worry about occupying two spaces. You could just plug in on either side of the vehicle, and all of these new updated V3 plus supercharging locations have magic docks built in, so even if you don't have an adapter down the road, theoretically you should be able to just pop out that magic dock and plug in your non-Tesla and get adequate charging speeds. And I think this is an absolutely crucial stage to getting everybody on board with electric vehicles. It can't be this complicated. You know, I was just watching through Tom Malogny's video, which is very thorough and explains the whole process on how to set up supercharging on your GM product and how it works and how to put on the adapter and dongle and everything. And I was just like, boy, I can't fathom some grandma that just wanted to buy an EV and bought a Chevy Bolt because it was cheaper, or bought a Chevy Equinox because she wanted to have accessibility handles and Teslas don't have that. And then imagining her having to walk through the app setup process, ordering an adapter, and having to figure out how to plug in the adapter and how to park and everything. And I was like, this is just not going to work, which is why I think the end goal that we all need to be working towards, which thankfully I think Tesla is going to help us do now that the charging team actually exists, is we need to have a standardized connector so that there's not fumbling around with all of these stupid adapters everywhere. And you need to be able to just pull into any electric vehicle charging station and grab the cable and plug in and start charging. I don't care if you have to have plug and charge functionality or have a little card reader to tap your credit card on. The new V3 Plus chargers have that as well now, but still, it's just gotta work. There's already enough differences from switching to a gas car to an EV in the first place, and standardizing the charging equipment and the charging infrastructure is a crucial stage for everybody. And seeing the adapter becoming on sale is, I think, a decent compromise for people who already made the switch to electric. But if we're wanting to get, you know, the next 90% of drivers on the road over to electric, we really got to simplify and streamline this whole process. And I don't think the answer is just, well, everybody has to buy a Tesla, because people buy all kinds of different car brands for all kinds of different reasons. It could be because they don't like Elon, or it could be as simple as they really want CarPlay, or they really want accessibility handles, or maybe they want a different designed interior. Maybe they really care about having a display behind the steering wheel. I don't care about that type of thing, but just to assume everybody in the public eye is going to like the exact same thing that I like, no, that's just ridiculous and that's nonsensical. And in my opinion, it's kind of living in denial to assume that, well, Tesla has the best charging infrastructure, so everybody has to buy a Tesla. No, that's not the way to do it. All these charging providers have to work together, and having a standardized connector is crucial, and making it as easy as possible to just grab the cable and plug in, that's crucial. So I'm glad to see GM finally making moves on that, and because that covers such a wide range of different styles of EV between the Bolt and a Hummer, to me that's a good indication that now with Tesla's new charging team, they are willing to open up the supercharger network to pretty much everybody. That actually gives me a lot of hope for the Aptera, because I was slightly concerned that, you know, Tesla might have certain charging speed requirements on the network, because Aptera said they're going to peak out around 50-60 kilowatts, but now to see them be willing to open up all 17,000 charging stalls, even to the Chevy Bolt with an adapter which peaks at around 50 kilowatts, to me is a very good indication that Aptera should have no problem with getting supercharger access next year. But I'll talk more about that in my next video. So thanks again for for everybody supporting this channel directly. It really helps us out a ton, as does just watching these videos. So thanks again. Have an excellent rest of your day.